Idaho Matters podcast is brought to you by St. Luke's On-Demand Virtual Care, which allows patients to see a provider from their home using a computer or smartphone with on-demand care for common ailments such as a cough, sore throat, or a sinus issue. More information at stlukesonline.org. From Boundary to Bear Lake, Fremont to Payette, Owyhee to Oneida, there are interesting people, places, and histories in all of Idaho's counties. And Idaho Matters wants to share it with you with stories from all 44 counties that make up the Gem State. Email your ideas to idahomatters@boisestate.edu or use the Talk to Us feature in our app, available on Apple and Android, and tune in each weekday at noon for Idaho Matters. From the studios of Boise State Public Radio News, I'm Gemma Gaudette. This is Idaho Matters. A Canadian company that wants to restart mining at an old open pit mine in Owyhee County has just signed a first-of-its-kind agreement with the Shoshone-Paiute Tribes. The agreement covers everything from cultural stewardship to environmental protection to economic participation. The mine actually sits on traditional Shoshone-Paiute territory, and it is north of the Duck Valley Reservation. Marco Avando, Public Affairs Officer for the Shoshone-Paiute Tribes, and Emily Hendrickson, Manager of External Affairs for Integra Resources, are joining us now to talk more about this new agreement. I want to welcome both of you to the program.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thanks.
Marco, let me start the conversation with you today. Where exactly is the mine? As I mentioned, this is traditional territory, though, for the Shoshone-Paiute, correct?
This is. So the mine site, the Delamar project, is located about approximately 73 miles northwest of the reservation's current boundaries.
And Emily, this mine was active back in the 1800s and then again in the 1900s. Can you tell us a little bit about the mine? Because my understanding is your company wants to dig for gold and silver.
Yep, that's exactly right. So we know that the Silver City area where the mine is nearby has a long history of gold and silver mining dating back to the 1860s. Most recently, we call modern mining happened up at Delamar in the late 70s through the late 1990s. And at that point, the price of gold and silver had dropped so low that it made the project no longer economic. And so Integra, with today's gold prices and technology, is able to go back into this previously disturbed area, and that's what we're proposing to do.
So, Marco, I want to talk about this agreement. This agreement, rather. Why is it the first of its kind, really, in the country?
We really consider this the first of its kind due to the fact that Integra reached out to the tribes first. Historically, mining companies, whether they're mining for gold, silver, rare earth minerals, lithium, they reach out to tribal nations after the fact, after they got the permitting, after they started digging, putting shovels in the ground. So tribes are often seen as an afterthought. Integra wanted to look at a new model and pursue something different. So they reached out to us before the permitting process was even approved, which meant a significant step. Traditionally, Western Shoshone and Northern Paiute lands hold vast resources in these minerals and metals. So we have decades of experience working with gold mining companies and mining companies in general on how the permitting process works and how corporate social responsibility works as well. So we have a fair share of precedents before us. And what happened with Integra was simply unprecedented. So it was something we really wanted to pursue.
So, Marco, I want to break down some of the things the agreement will do. And can we start with Indigenous recognition? Why is this important to you and to the tribes?
This agreement is important to us because it just simply states the fact that they are operating on Shoshone, Paiute, and Bannock traditional territories that we hold sacred. We hold the Owyhee Mountains in high regard as a place of community. So having this framework in check really helps us reaffirm the rights that we were granted under the current federal government guidelines through the Constitution as the Supreme Court puts it, domestic sovereign territories. So it matters a great deal to us in that regard.
And then you have economic empowerment and participation. So, will the tribes actually get money back from the mine?
In simple terms, yes, that is the eventual goal. We want to use it as community development. So, to support our infrastructure, support educational needs, anything our community needs, we hope to utilize some of this revenue as that.
And then, Marco, you have cultural and environmental protection. So, what kind of protections will the tribes have when it comes to the environment, both right now, but then let's look into the future once this mine closes down again someday?
Yeah, so the first part is we have cultural monitors. Now, these monitors are people we hold in our community in high regard for having vast knowledge of cultural artifacts, protocols, traditions, oral histories. And these cultural monitors work hand in hand with Integra's employees in identifying historical artifacts that are found at the Delamar project and determining on what, when, and how these artifacts got there. We follow certain protocols on if we need to avoid the site moving forward, if it's a place we could relocate, if it's something that we simply could just disregard. Pretty much all the standards of maintaining our cultural identity in the area, we have
Mhm.
those monitors for. Looking forward, we deeply respect the pristineness of the region. The Owyhee Canyonlands Wilderness is right next to the reservation boundaries, and it's something we want to maintain as something pristine for future generations to enjoy. And that goes into the fact of reclamation. We want to make sure that if any, toxic materials that flow into the watershed areas or into the regional biodiversity, those are kept from ever leaking out or dispersing into the region, which could threaten those vital species,
Mhm.
which can include special food sources or medicinal needs for our own cultural practices. So, by working in this two pronged now and the future steps, we really were working to make sure that our heritage and our sovereignty is upheld to the best of our
Mhm.
abilities.
And Emily, Integra has been working on this agreement with the tribes now for 5 years, I believe. Why was it important for your company to partner this way with the tribes? Because as Marco mentioned, you came to the tribes instead of waiting until you had already put all of this in action and then you go to the tribes.
Yeah, exactly. So, Integra entered Idaho almost now 8 years ago, late 2017, in acquiring the Delamar project. And we honestly just kind of looked around us and saw where other mining projects were entering into conflict or litigation or just causing bad will between specifically tribal communities and the companies. And we just thought there has to be a better way. So we started early conversations about 5 years ago, have done a lot of co-learning with members of the Shoshone-Paiute Business Council, trips to other jurisdictions where these types of agreements are put into practice and learning how that's all happened. So really, we just kind of looked at this process and said, gosh, there has to be a better way. And that's really kind of in tune with how Integra approaches engagement overall. We would so much rather have that conversation, open the door, learn from others. One of the other important pieces that are moving right now is indigenous knowledge studies that tribes are conducting, on their own kind of historical and contemporary interests in these areas that will help inform, how we operate in the future. So we really just took the approach of, listening and learning at the get-go and designing our project in a way that works for everyone.
And Emily, environmental protection is a big part of this agreement with the tribes, and in fact, this is where a lot of people start to disagree with mining. Right? Is the environmental impact of it? So, what is Integra's plan to protect the area around the mine?
Yeah, absolutely. So, we hear a lot of the times about the mining law of 1872, and that grants US citizens and subsidiaries the right to mine on federal lands. And this project is located on Bureau of Land Management land. So we will go through the National Environmental Policy Act, or NEPA process, which should take about 2 years. And in addition to that, you are also complying with every single federal law, state law, local ordinance. So everything from, Endangered Species Act, Migratory Bird, waters of the U.S. with the Army Corps of Engineers. There are so many different agencies and layers of regulatory protection that govern a mining operation. And that exists, from everything, even a drill hole we do now, there's an entire permitting process to help us explore the deposit itself, reclamation around that. And then there's also the bonding process, which is often left out of that conversation. So before we ever put a shovel in the ground, we have to give the state essentially the correct amount of money that if all of us were to be abducted by aliens tomorrow, the state would have the funds in their coffers to put the land back together.
Marco, I have just 2 minutes left, and I'm curious to know how hopeful you are that this agreement can serve as a blueprint for other tribes with projects that impact their land.
Yeah, we really do hope this serves as a model to work with not only Integra, but with all the other mining corporations in the states. Primarily, my tribe has multiple agreements in place with other mining companies, and we want to see if they can implement that model too and really move the needle and the perspective in a new direction that we recognize mining is necessary to continue the society we live in, but there is a good medium where we could balance tribal sovereignty, environmental protection, and get the resources we need to continue to thrive. So with this, we really hope that this agreement is breaking that precedence and making the unprecedented possible.
And Emily, before we wrap up with about a minute left, as you mentioned, Integra submitted a plan for the mine to BLM in March. So what are the next steps in the process?
Yeah, so the next major step is going to be initiating that NEPA, National Environmental Policy Act process, which includes, more tribal consultation, public involvement, and comment opportunities, impact analyses, all of that good stuff. And we expect that to kick off by the end of this year. And then we're also working really hard and continuing to engage with other nations who have interest in our project area and continuing to advance towards hopefully similar agreements like these.
Well, I want to thank you both so much for taking time to talk with us about this. We've been speaking with Marco Ovando. He's Public Affairs Officer for the Shoshone-Paiute Tribes, and Emily Hendrickson, Manager of External Affairs for Integra Resources. We've been discussing the first of its kind agreement regarding a proposed gold and silver mine in Owyhee County. This is the Idaho Matters podcast. I'm Gemma Gaudet.